So we've always said on this channel that the pandemic was an absolute godsend to the Brexiteers. It really was, because these past 2 years, any damage caused by Brexit, they could just blame on the pandemic. And they've pretty much have. Any problems, that's not Brexit, that's the pandemic. And it has been really, really difficult for the economists to actually filter out what is Brexit damage and what is, pandemic damage. Now, there have been economists who have gone and done, the hard digging and dug into the data and said, actually, that is Brexit damage. And we've gone over that. But of course, Brexiteers have completely ignored that and just said, no, that's the pandemic, and just written off any of those 2 years. But we've also been very, very much saying to you all this time that, look, the further and further we get away, the less they can blame the pandemic. And we are starting to see that now. The new trade figures that have come out, disaster, absolute disaster. The rest of the world is getting back to normal with their trade, except for one. And you don't really even have to guess which one country is having these notable trade exceptions. Because shockingly, turns out shooting yourself in the foot actually has consequences when you try to go and run a marathon. Who knew? But anyway, let's go diving into these figures, because, like I say, these are not, as the title of the article says, does not make good reading for the Brexiteers and even for the rest of Britain. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, there is the YouTube subscription button down below called the Pony Club. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button as well that helps support the channel as well. So let's get on with this then. This comes from the New European with the title of Trade Figures Are a Disaster for Brexiteers and Britain. It has been the perfect cover for Brexit, but the effects of COVID are now coming to an end. And like the retreating tide, it is revealing what is really going on beneath the surface. The latest quarterly figures paint a grim picture of UK trade. Since 2018, which the ONS thinks is the best guide, our exports to the EU have shrunk from £34.4 billion in the second quarter of 2018 to just £40 billion now. But even these figures do not give the whole picture. Because as COVID restrictions and disruptions end, the world economies have woke up and the global trade routes reawakened, or they did for nearly everyone. For some strange reason, global Britain, the new world-beating behemoth, has suddenly freed from the chains of the EU control and ready to stride around the world, cutting new trade deals left, right, and centre, seems to have stayed in bed. The evidence is clear. The UK is now less globally is now less a globally important trading nation and is rapidly being left behind by its rivals, and trade is becoming a smaller part of its economy. If you don't trust me, just have a look at the latest analysis from the Office of Budget Responsibility, the government's own economic watchdog. And here you can see the graph at the bottom. That blue line is us. And here's everyone else. And you can see the big dip in the pandemic. Everyone else rising on up. The orange one's the US. The blue one there, that's the Euro area. The green one is Japan. The red one is Japan. The green one is other advanced economics. So that's anyone who is, again, outside of the Eurozone. So probably Israel, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And then we're here. you know, doesn't look very good. And especially when you go back and this starts at 2016, that massive dip, and it sort of gets back, sort of again, dips again, pandemic, whoop, 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 whoop. And it's obvious the direction of travel that we are headed in. But anyway, it continues. It has found that all advanced economies have suffered the same collapse of trade during COVID, but the UK has missed out on much of the rebound. All advanced economies trade fell by 20% during the first wave of the pandemic. But by the end of last year, when the average advanced economies trade was 3% higher than before COVID, the UK's remained 12% below. The UK's trade percentage as a GDP has collapsed, and it is down to 2.5 times more than other similar countries. Or you can look at the more recent work of Oskander Sapalno from the Aston University Business School and the Centre for Business Prosperity. He mined the latest data from the UN, from the UDAC, the UN's trade and development arm, and discovered that the UK's trade has just not kept up with the rest of the world. The global trade has recovered from the pandemic and is now worth just £7.7 trillion and a growth of just 20% on its pre-COVID level. Yet, the UK's trade has flatlined, while our rivals like Germany, Japan have seen trade surge by over 9%, the USA by 17%, Italy by 23%. The UK has managed to increase its trade by just 0.33%. It is barely even measurable. Again, you can see the map, the graph. Yeah, it does not make for good reading. This is a disaster economically. Foreign trade is good for the economy. It improves competition and productivity. For all the ranting about the UK becoming global Britain, the figures show the exact opposite is the case. The UK is becoming more insular, it is trading less than its rivals, and it is nowhere near as open as it used to be. The latest report from the Resolution Foundation and the UK in a Changing Europe think tanks illustrates this problem very clearly. The UK has seen its trade openness decline sharply. France, with a very similar trade profile to the UK, has not suffered anything like as much, and it is an indication that Brexit is just damaging the UK's trade relationship with the EU, but the world. The UK is just a far less attractive place to do business. Again, trade openness compared with our others. France, where it says, -2, Canada, -4, UK, -8. These are not good figures. One surprising fact is that it is not UK exports to the continent that have fallen so dramatically, but imports from other EU states. This may very well be down to the fact of the increased red tape and the uncertainty mean that a lot of EU companies just aren't bothering to sell into the UK. And while UK firms are still desperate to export and are trying to manage to do so despite the new barriers to trade. Currently looking at Germany's exports to the UK markets for a very frightening reading. The UK has fallen behind other countries as German exports to the world boom and those to the UK have fallen. So the UK's importance to Germany as a market for its exports and source of imports, the UK was Germany's 9th largest source of imports back in 2016. It is now 13th. It is also about to drop out of the list of the top 10 export markets for Germany and to be replaced by the Czech Republic. Again, you look at the graph there, doesn't look good. It seemed that while British industry had little choice but to take on the added costs if it wanted to export to the market of over 447 million customers, our former colleagues in the EU have often decided that selling to over the 66 million Brits is just not worth the added bother. For those who think this is good news, as British firms will now be forced to use British suppliers, think again. British companies used German, French, or Dutch suppliers because they were better and cheaper. Denying them that opportunity forces up their costs and therefore their prices. One reason that Brexit has caused higher inflation. If you are hoping that those trade deals with the non-EU countries are going to help fill this gap, then you're going to have to wait a long time. None are large enough to actually make any discernible difference to the UK economy. Increasingly, there has also also far been on one UK trade deal that the UK had before, which is better afterwards, and that was the one with Japan, which was not just rolled over but slightly improved. So hats off to Liz Truss for once. Yeah, it has had no positive impact on our trade with Japan. In fact, the opposite has happened. UK trade with Japan has declined. The reason is not hard to find. Many Japanese companies use the UK as their bridge into the EU. Now that bridge has been burnt, they see no reason to trade via the UK. As a result, many Japanese companies have moved their European headquarters and their money out of the UK. And once again, as you can see in the graph here, it shows. The government's own figures show that the total trade between the UK and Japan was over £22.9 billion in 4 quarters to the end of the first quarter of 2022. That was a decrease of over 4.5% on the previous year, and UK exports to Japan fell by 6%, and UK imports from Japan fell by 3%. It is hardly surprising that trade is so badly affected by Brexit. After all, it does little else but pile extra costs and red tape onto business. And there is now endless form filling in that HMRC has stated will cost over £7 billion a year, the new testing, safety regimes, and merely copying the existing EU ones, and therefore it now doubles the cost for firms, delays at borders, and a whole set of new checks that are yet to be introduced by the British government. On top of that wonderful benefit of being the base choice for thousands of worldwide firms which wanted entry into the EU has now gone. You can forget about the propaganda of global Britain. We are now Little Britain and getting smaller every day. Turns out shooting yourself in the foot really does hurt. And yeah, this is, to be honest, if you're a Brexiteer and you're reading this, it does make for bad reading. It really does. But you know, it's the same argument over and over again. If you brought this to a Brexiteer or you went to a Brexit supporter and you said, well, look at this article, look how bad things are going, their response would be, well, oh no, Brexit wasn't about trade, it was about sovereignty, or it was about something else. They have a fantastic way, as many comments over the years when we've done videos about this. Well, what about the trade situation? What about when this happens? You always get someone in the chat who goes, oh, Brexit was never about trade, it was meant to be about something else, or something else entirely. Is always about moving the goalpost, because they never really want to have and sit down and have the real world discussion about what happens when you lose all this trade. You know, just as the article said, the deal we've done in Japan favors Japan far more than it favors the EU. But even then, Japan is now exporting far less to the UK. And we're not even selling that much to Japan because, again, Japan's on the other side of the world. So much for the prospect of, hoping that joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership may be the saving grace for the UK and the much vaunted trade deal to get there. Not going to happen. But then again, this is the fancy economics of Brexit. Eventually, the bubble will burst. They'll run out of hot air. They're running out of it already. Johnson really was the last gasp, and Liz Truss will double down on this. But when people figure out that for all Truss's, crowing about how brilliant, Brexit is meant to be going, about all these new trade deals and etc., the penny's going to drop sooner or later. You can't hold back this tide. This is, Brexit is the crack. It is becoming slowly the crack in the dam, and you can't stop the crack expanding. The Brexiteers are desperately just ignoring the crack while some of us are going, there's a crack there. You can see the water coming out of it. And that's generally going to be the case. It will start off as a crack, and this crack is growing ever more bigger. Is the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about, no one wants to acknowledge. And yes, I am aware of sort of Labour's stance on it, which again, I sort of agree with, but even that will change eventually. So as always, yeah, more bad news courtesy of Brexit. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people for watching today. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page. There's a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, or there's the YouTube thank you button as well, which is sort of the same thing. Or there's the YouTube Pony Club as well. You can subscribe to that. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next.